Thomas Johnson, a man with a role as a slaveholder, a figure who played a part in the harm done to Native heritage as assimilation was accepted practice, was born July 11, 1802, in Nelson County, Virginia, to parents Claiborne Johnson and Elizabeth Sims. They went on to have about 6 daughters and 5 sons, most of them dying at a young age. As a teenager, Thomas would go on to Missouri to train to become a Methodist minister. By 1826, Thomas Johnson had officially become a Methodist minister. During this period, he met and fell in love with Sarah Davis. Sarah, born June 22, 1810 in Kentucky, was the daughter of George Davis and Sarah Ruddle. Her mother had been taken prisoner by Native people at Ruddle's Mill in Kentucky when she was just 12. Thomas and Sarah were married on September 7, 1830. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act, forcing Native American tribes in the eastern United States to territory west of the Mississippi River to make room for white settlers. This may have sounded like it allowed for a peaceful negotiation, but instead, acts of coercion, bribery, and trickery followed a brutal removal of Native tribes west. Several treaties between 1825 and 1831, negotiated by the Shawnee of Ohio and southwest Missouri, led to the tribe agreeing to move to roughly 1.6 million acres in what was known as the Great American Desert west of Missouri. It was the new Indian Territory. Chief Fish of the Shawnee sought a missionary to provide his people with a strong education.
23 tribes here. So in addition to the white students, that means that there were 24 languages spoken on site. So the missionaries thought that they were helping by giving a common language, and so that was taught here at school. That was when the federal government started the federally mandated boarding schools. This was started in 1839, and this was a reservation school, so it was on the Shawnee Reservation, which is why it was called the Shawnee Mission, and it was in partnership with the Shawnee tribe, who wanted to give their children and the children in the area skill sets, because prior to this, a lot of the tribes had been relocated and forcibly removed from their homelands. Many had died, and this would give a way to positively assimilate into the white cities and states that were building up around them.
Thomas Johnson, with his experience, was selected by the Methodist Church to educate and assimilate the Shawnee in the Turner area of present-day Wyandotte County, Kansas. His brother, William Johnson, served the Kansa tribe. Sarah, his wife, would go on to nurse the sick and serve as a counselor and guide for Native women in the tribes at the mission. The mission served both the Shawnee and Delaware tribes until 1839, when Thomas Johnson sought to expand his facilities. This initiated the relocation of the mission to the site where it stands today.
We have 3 historic structures, the oldest structures in the state of Kansas, and 12 acres in northeast Johnson County, which is a feat that this area wasn't developed during the rise of suburbia in Johnson County.
Delaware asked to use interest from their school funds to educate their children also at the labor school, prompting thousands of dollars in donations for construction and housing. In 1841, the East Building was constructed after the Kansa tribe informed the government that they also wished to apply the interest from their school fund toward educating their children at the school. Previously overcrowded, the school aimed to have enough buildings to accommodate 150 students. Children from 23 different tribes were eventually sent to this school to learn basic academics, along with manual arts and agriculture. The East Building contained the main chapel, boys' classrooms, and dormitory, while the north building held the girls' classrooms and bedrooms. Other original structures, including a blacksmith shop, schoolhouse, and trading post, no longer exist.
Many of the students that were here, and it was an integrated school, so there were indigenous students and white students that came to the school. The school bell that we have on display would ring at 5 a.m. to start the day. They would have 3 meals a day, multiple hours of chores, and then they would have manual labor classes, and that translates to trade school classes. Manual labor classes is a historic term, but it would be the trade school classes of blacksmithing, carpentry, sewing, or spinning, and then they would have some hours of academic work, and then dinner, or what they called supper. And then after that, all of the children would have additional chores, and then bedtime was at about 8 to 8:30 every night.
In 1843, Thomas Johnson fell ill and passed the mission to his son Alexander, his oldest, while he went east for treatment. At this time, a third building was in progress of being constructed. The cost of the building was no less than $30,000, of which the government paid 1/4 and the Missionary Society paid the rest. Thomas returned in 1847. In May 1854, President Franklin Pierce signed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which created the territories of Kansas and Nebraska and allowed residents to decide the issue of slavery through popular sovereignty. People in the territory, including white settlers who would raid the newly formed territory for lands, would decide whether Kansas was free or slave. Following the signing of the Kansas-Nebraska Act was the eruption of the Border Wars, where conflicts between pro-slavery and anti-slavery men continued for years over whether Kansas would be free or slave. This led to so many conflicts and deaths on both sides. In March 1855, Reverend Johnson, a slaveholder who held enslaved men, women, and children in the territory, was elected to the Territorial Council during the passage of several pro-slavery bogus laws. The Shawnee Mission served as the second capital of Kansas Territory from 1855 to 1856. In 1858, Reverend Johnson gave the mission to his son, and he moved his family to a colonial home on a farm near current-day 35th and Agnes. It is about 3 miles from Westport and 4 miles from Kansas City. His son Alexander kept the Shawnee School and farm running despite concerns of the government wanting to cut funding. In April 1861, the Civil War broke out, only a few months after Kansas entered the Union as a free state. A pro-Union provisional government of Missouri was established, implementing extreme measures to secure loyalty within the state. Under these policies, citizens were required to swear formal oaths of allegiance to the Union. Despite his Southern roots and his sympathies, Reverend Thomas Johnson remained loyal to the federal government, and when the moment came, he declared his allegiance to the Union, putting a target on his back. The years that followed were defined by brutal violence as border ruffians, bushwhackers, and guerrilla fighters on both sides raided settlements, burned homes, and killed their neighbors. In 1862, the mission closed after the remaining Native Americans left to reunite with their families in Oklahoma, and the federal government rescinded its contract with the school. A year later, General Thomas Ewing established a Union military post at Shawnee Mission to protect Kansas from Missouri guerrilla raiders. The site was occupied by the Union Army during the Battle of Westport until 1864. That January, the Shawnee tribe requested the possible sale of the Shawnee Indian Mission land to be excluded from the Treaty of 1864, as it would violate rights under contract between the tribe and the church. Then disaster struck. On January 2nd, 1865, Reverend Thomas Johnson was killed at the front doorstep of his home one frigid night, allegedly by a group of bushwhackers who were supposedly seeking revenge. They fired into his home with his family inside. Miraculously, only Reverend Johnson was shot. It's said he was killed for siding with the Union, but this murder remains unsolved. Reverend Thomas Johnson was quietly buried at the Shawnee Mission Cemetery, now located at Shawnee Mission Parkway and Canterbury Road in Fairway, Kansas. His wife, Sarah, left to live with one of their sons, as she was too distraught to return to the house. To this day, Reverend Thomas Johnson, the namesake of Johnson County, Johnson Drive, and other prominent locations in Kansas, remains a contested figure. His involvement with the Shawnee Indian Mission has been described by some as divisive and others as honorable. The remaining 12 acres and the original 3 buildings built by Thomas Johnson were eventually acquired by the Kansas State Historical Society in 1927. In 1929, the Shawnee Indian Mission opened as a museum and historic site, owned by the Kansas State Historical Society and today operated by the city of Fairway. Today, the Shawnee Indian Mission functions as a museum to showcase the history of the buildings, the land, the indigenous people, and the many other impactful events of the era. History can be complicated, and this historic site is the location of so many pivotal events that shaped our country. Its existence ensures that these stories are told for generations to come.